Well, I guess we better get started with this session, which is a joint session from all over the globe. We have representatives from each of the associations, the population studies associations from around the globe, the early career scholars representing here. And we're going to talk in this panel debate about COVID-19 and particularly also how it affected early career academics. So what has been the effect of the COVID pandemic for their work, but also what are the unexpected challenges, but also the unexpected potential benefits that came for their careers given the COVID-19 pandemic all around the globe, which affected all of us. But there have been a lot of discussions and also talks about what is the effect for the early academics. We're going to hear from them themselves here in this session. So we will give the floor to the 5 representatives that we have. And I would like to briefly introduce each 5 of them to tell you a bit where they're from and what they're working on. And then we move on to have their individual presentations and pitches about the topic, followed by a panel debate where we talk about different questions that relate to the topic of this panel. I don't have a particular order, but I'm just simply going to start with Feli Kinzuanga. I hope I pronounce your name correctly like that. You are a PhD student at University of Louvain-la-Neuve. You're actually in a very exciting stage of your thesis work. As I understand, you're defending your thesis very soon, next week, if I'm right. And you're working on male fertility, both levels, determinants, and dynamics in a context of the socioeconomic mutations in Ghana, Senegal, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And you are representing here the African Population Association. And on a personal note, you're probably also going to say a bit more on that yourself. You were clearly affected by the COVID pandemic in different ways, but we will hear more on that later on, I guess. Second person here in the panel today is Stephanie Hernandez. She is a postdoctoral research fellow in biosocial training program at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She is representing the North American, the PAA, here as an early career scholar. And you work basically at the intersectionality to examine health disparities among adults with minorized racial, ethnic, and sexual identities. You have a PhD in demography from the University of Texas, San Antonio, and you have a master's degree in demography and a bachelor in sociology from Florida State. Happy to have also you here, Stephanie. Welcome. The third person is Flora Aninditiao. Do I spell that correctly, or you better correct me?
Yes, yes.
Very good.
Correct.
You're a junior researcher at Lembago Demography Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Indonesia. And you're representing here the Asian Population Association, and you're a PhD student at the same faculty I was just referring to. And you work mainly on the intersection between human capital, poverty, and social protection as your key interest. Fourth in line is Gusta Wachter. She is currently a PhD student at the Netherlands Interdisciplinary Demographic Institute in The Hague and affiliated with the University of Groningen. She represents the European Association here, and her work mainly focuses in her research on the role of the development of the second generation, particularly their union and family formation characteristics in a comparative perspective. And she is, like also the first person that I introduced, Feli, close to finishing her PhD. So you soon will be a doctoral, a postdoc at the same institute in the Netherlands. And last, but definitely not least, I would like to also introduce Igor Cavallini Johansson. You're a sociologist by training with a master's degree and a PhD in demography. And you're currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Campinas in Brazil. Your work focuses on the social and environmental repercussions of large infrastructure hydroelectric dams in the Brazilian Amazon. And you're particularly focusing in your research on population health issues in general. Thanks for all of you to join us here. As mentioned before, two of us have recorded a message and a pitch that we would like to play for you now. We asked each of the 5 representatives from the regional associations to give a short pitch about the topic of the panel we are having here. And 2 of them have done so in a recorded video, and that's the ones we will start with, and we will then follow with short pitches by the other 3. So I would like to start the first video message or pitch, as you would like to call it, that was recorded by Flora. So I hope the video can start and we can listen to you. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I am Flora Andinditya, a junior researcher at the Lembaga Demografi, Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Indonesia, and also a PhD student at the same faculty. Today I would like to share the impact of COVID-19 to the early academic career in population studies from my own perspective and some colleges from Indonesia. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted young researchers at both professional and personal levels. At the professional level, the positive impacts include increased access to knowledge exchange, accelerated scholarly communications, expanded networks that benefit international collaboration, and also opportunities to develop new approaches in researching population issues. The adverse effects include growing workloads, increasing difficulties in seeking funding for research projects, and becoming heavily saturated due to over-engagement with communication technology. At the personal level, greater responsibilities at home cause difficulties in maintaining good time management and also physical and mental health. Maintaining work-life balance is also increasingly challenging. It affects researchers' productivity. Challenges are also seen even among young researchers. They are mostly familiar with the latest technology and also the intensive use of the digital technology. The first challenge is stable internet connection. It has been an increasingly important basic needs of young researchers. However, only those who live in urban or more developed areas could afford for the internet access. The second challenge is the hustle culture. Digital technology has changed the work rhythm. It seems that engaging in more frequent and conflicting schedules and having multiple devices to attend multiple meetings have become socially or digitally acceptable habits. However, this hustle culture can harm our well-being. Challenges also emerge from employment or labor market perspective for those who work in the demographic or population studies. The pandemic has forced researchers to navigate their careers under new research practices and also the unforeseeable future. And there are several challenges for those who are already employed on population studies. First is finding new approach to collect the primary data and to organize field activities. The second challenge is seeking for research funding, since more government and institutions' budget has been allocated for COVID-19 and health-related purposes. Third challenge is having double roles. On one hand, junior researchers need to support larger teams, and on the other hand, they function to mentor, to share both research and managerial tasks to interns or new research assistants. And these double roles are taking time and energy and become high challenge. There are also challenges for those who want to enter the labor market in population studies. The first challenge is that the salary is not competitive compared to the non-academic jobs in general. And second, there are quite limited opportunities to join research team during the pandemic, since many research institutions aim to maximize their current resources. So, to cope with those challenges, here are some strategies used by the researchers. The first strategy is related to communication. As communication is essential, the early career researchers need to consider the best approach to communicate with colleges. For example, having a hybrid meetings, both in-person and online meetings, can be applied when the government relaxes the confinement regulation. It is important to note that having engagement with a wider professional community, such as professional associations, can be helpful for the researchers, as long as these communities can provide a safe place for the researchers to grow both personally and academically, and does not add more pressure in the competitive atmosphere. The second strategy is related to time management. So to be productive, pursuing good time management for researchers is important so they can achieve both their professional and personal goals. The third strategy is about having side jobs. To compensate the decreasing work hours and wage, some researchers often take several side jobs or projects. Some jobs are related to academic and some others are not. And the fourth strategy is related to research funding. Recently, more government offices have allocated more budget to assess the pandemic impact for policymaking. Private sectors have also started to revive and to explore evidence-based business opportunities. So as the economy bounces back, it is time to engage more with public and private institutions to search for research funding opportunities. So thank you for your time to listen to my shared experience.
Thank you very much, Flora, for this very insightful video where you already share a lot of the different elements that we definitely go to touch upon, I think, later on in our debate as well, from the side of the Asian Population Association. Thank you for that one. I would like to turn now to the second video that was recorded. I think, Igor, you recorded also a video message on behalf of the Latin American Population Association that you're presenting here. So I would like to suggest that we're going to have your video shown now to the audience.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you very much for the invitation to present some thoughts about the current situation of early career in population studies with a focus in Latin America. My name is Igor Cavallini Johansen. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at University of Campinas in Brazil. So my presentation is structured in 4 topics. The first one will present some context for the discussion here. The second, the COVID-19 and early career professionals. The third, the impacts on early career professionals in demography/population studies in Latin America. And finally, some concluding remarks. Besides the health impacts, COVID-19 also had important effects actually on population lives in Latin America. For example, in terms of mobility, because people could not move anymore given the protocol of social distancing, and this had implication directly in the education because children and young people could not go to their schools or universities anymore. But we also had other consequences that are still being investigated, like in sexual and reproductive health, and also in labor market, again related to the mobility of the population. People could not go to their jobs anymore, and many of these jobs just disappeared because this places just had to close. So people were losing their jobs and consequently losing their income. And this had as a consequence also the issues in terms of food security, people not being able to buy the most basic needs for maintaining themselves. So COVID-19 and early career professionals. First of all, I mean by early career professional here, the research scholars who are early on in their research trajectory. This means postgraduate students up to 3 to 5 years after PhD completion. So this means people who are studying still, and the others that had already graduated, had got the PhD and are or in a postdoctoral position or beginning their career as teachers and researchers in some institution, formally bound to these institutions. Before going ahead, we have to remember that the same person has different roles. So we are discussing the early career here, but this person also can be a daughter and a granddaughter and a mother and a wife. And this complicates things because in this context of social crisis and people getting sick and people dying close to you, or even not close, but you are seeing the news, you realize what's going on. So this is a really complicated, hard, difficult moment for everyone. And now what we are doing here is to add to this complex situation a new layer that complicates things even more, that is being an early career exactly in this moment of the history. So the impacts of early career professionals in demography or population studies in Latin America. We have many damaging impacts on training, but we cannot forget that the key word when we deal with Latin American issues is inequality. This is the most central term that we have to consider for everything we are going to study related to the region. So we have here the unequal institutional support. So not all institutions could provide the structure for their students to be home studying or working. Besides that, we also have unequal students access to internet to proceed with their studies, and losing of close contact between professors and students, what had to be adapted since we did not have any other option. And the questions are, what has been lost? Can we recover? How to recover? We do not have the answers for these questions, but in Brazil, for example, what is being doing is that the postgraduate programs are postponing the date or the deadline for defending the thesis or the dissertation in a way to consider this time kind of lost during the COVID-19 pandemic. But in demography, we also have to consider that we have laboratory classes and infrastructure that is crucial. For example, using specific softwares or data sets in the institutional server, or even more powerful machines, I mean here, computers that are only provided at the institution. All of that just disappeared in a second. At least it was not anymore available for everyone to go to their institutions and to have access to it anymore. And besides that, we also have the field work, because many fields in demography need to do field work, to talk in person to people. And in this case, this field work just had to be postponed and research projects changed abruptly. We also have impacts on labor market. Again, we have the inequalities because some people could adapt themselves better than others. We have some early career that are already employed, so they had to face the challenge of remote teaching. But most early career are still under training, and they had to face economic crisis all over the region, which means scarcer job opportunities. We also have to consider the data availability issue that is crucial for learning and also for those early career that are still employed. Data are really important for producing new material for publication, and the census in many censuses in Latin America had to be postponed. In Brazil, it happened, it was supposed to happen in 2020, and it was postponed to 2021, and then postponed again to 2022, so next year. So this postponement issue happened in different countries of the region. Besides Brazil, we also had Bolivia and Ecuador with the same problem. Some concluding remarks. COVID-19 really impacted early career in Latin America, but it also had some opportunities in terms of demography studies. We had many COVID-19 impacted research areas that could, open new venues for investigation. So those who could adapt had potential advancements, many possibilities of new studies. And we also had new funding available. So depending on where you study or where you work, you had new opportunities. One example is FAPESP, that is the main funding institution from São Paulo state in Brazil, that opened new funding opportunities for every different science fields, including demography, to understand COVID-19. But this is for São Paulo. We also had, in terms of Brazil as a whole, a really different picture. This is a letter that was published in Science in November 2021, so this year. And I would like to highlight this part with you. So despite precarious funding for science compared with high-income countries in 2020, Brazil was ranked 11th among nations that produced knowledge to fight COVID pandemic. Brazil's meaningful contributions are driven by early career researchers, but without proper investments, these young scientists will have no choice but to abandon their academic career or to leave the country. So to sum up, COVID-19 heavily impacted education and labor market for early career professionals in demography. The concrete results are still not fully understood, given the sanitary crisis is still on the go. But what we already know for sure is that in a region like Latin America, inequalities were potentiated. Considering that specific public and institutional policies should be devoted to reduce the gap created between professionals with capability to defend themselves and maybe even taking some advantage from the situation, and the others who were hit without proper tools to face this pandemic. These were some ideas to warm up the debate with colleagues from other regions of the world. Here are the references that I mentioned in my presentation, and thank you very, very much.
Thanks a lot to you, Igor, for presenting this very clearly. And I think I saw already some parallels and similar issues that both Flora and you bring up, also some differences already, or little different accents that you're putting on certain elements. But I really think this is a great starter of our discussion later on. And I've noted down already a couple of questions. So I'll come back to you for sure with more in-depth questions for you to elaborate on. I would like to continue our small row of pitches that we're doing here by inviting Feli. Would you be willing to share your insights more from the African Population Association side? I don't see your video at the moment, and I can't hear you either. If that remains, I suggest we just move on first to Stephanie Hernandez. Would you be willing to share your reflections on the topic from the North American PAA side?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So again, my name is Stephanie Hernandez. Good morning from Chapel Hill, North Carolina in the United States. Again, I'm here representing PA, the Population Association of America. And I want to start first by agreeing with many of the points that have already been made. I definitely can relate to a lot of the challenges and some of the opportunities that have been addressed. And I want to give a quick, some perspectives from North America. And to begin, I want to talk about my background and kind of where I stand in all this. So I defended my dissertation in March of 2020 on a Friday, and on a Monday, the following Monday, the university shut down. And so I was right at the peak of COVID in the United States. And then I started a postdoc in April of 2020 virtually because I couldn't move to North Carolina. So I was really starting a postdoc and a lot of transitions at a point where COVID was pretty bad in the United States. And so with that context, I want to talk a little bit about the challenges. And some of these challenges have already been discussed. So I'll move through them a little bit quickly. I agree with Flora in the terms of a growing workload. So, you know, the whole point of the postdoc is to become an independent researcher. Like, we need to establish independent lines of research that are different from our mentors. We need to get our names out. We need a network. We need to publish. So it's like we're right at the peak of our careers where we have to like start making a name for ourselves. Yet we have no opportunities to do this because there's no networking, there's no conferences. We can't reach our mentors, or we have limited time with our mentors. And so that's been really hard. We're also balancing a lot of different roles, like our last presenter spoke about. So we're parents, we're caretakers, we're instructors, we're collecting our own data. And so that's been really difficult. In terms of data and the census, of course, I'm a demographer, and perhaps many of you followed the issues with the 2020 US Census and its huge implications for redistricting in the United States, which has political consequences for this country. And so we're still grappling with the consequences of collecting our census in April of 2020 here in the United States. Also remote teaching and its consequences for not only the instructor, but for students. And so we know that a lot of students are suffering with mental health issues, and how do we balance that as an instructor and our own needs? And of course, job market. As a postdoc, we're making the transition, and now we're dealing with less opportunities, a saturated market. So here in the United States, we have candidates perhaps from the 2019 market, from the 2020 market, from the 2021 market, and now even the 2022 market. And so a very, very saturated market with less and less opportunities. And then more logistical, if you are lucky enough to get a campus interview, are you doing it via Zoom? Are you having to fly to a different city? And are you putting yourself and your family at risk? So all these logistical questions that come with the next stage of our academic careers. But it hasn't all been bad. There have been some positives that have arose, at least for me. And one of them has been the opportunity to network. So connecting with you all is a perfect opportunity that I would not have been able to do had this conference not been virtual. And the PA conferences that have been virtual, and other regional conferences as well. And then I'm also in the public health field. And so I have seen a huge increase in health disparities research among COVID, but also for other disparities here in the United States, which has been very beneficial for me, particularly because I study health disparities, but I can't see how that's a limitation for scholars who perhaps do not study health disparities. And I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie, for your reflections on this. And again, you see some parallels. You also raised some other elements, particularly also the job transitions, also towards a postdoctoral position, the saturated job market. And we come back to that, I think, in our debate as well. It raises a lot of questions already with me, but I obviously also at this stage already would like to invite the participants who are joining us here in this panel debate to come up with their questions via the chat. So if you have any questions that bubble up to your mind when listening to the short presentations already, feel free to use the chat function and already share those ideas, suggestions, questions you may have, so that we can take them on board when we move on in the second half of this session to the debate with the different speakers reflecting on the questions that come up. So don't be shy, feel free to join in the chat, and we will come back to you. I'll keep an eye on that. I would like to give a second try to have Veli present now. Veli Kinzuka, who is representing the African Population Conference. I don't see him on the video. He is there, but no. Yes, there you are. Good.
I'm there.
I see you now. Very good. Veli, I would like to invite you also to make your reflections on the topic as was asked.
I'll present the situation of student, PhD student of purposely African populations. My presentation is on 3 points. The first point is about the negative experience of COVID-19, COVID in student populations. The negative is first, COVID is a new ill who affects many students of Africa. It takes a long time to have a good health that affects the health of populations and their doctoral formations and many things that can do a good PhD processes. In one of the consequences of this ill that people takes a long time if you compare the time for doctoral formations and the time to be in good health for to do that. Like example for me that I must finish my PhD the past years, but COVID don't permit me because I do 6 months. I was very, very ill. That I take very late in my definition of my dissertation. One of these consequences is the period that they give you scholarships is stopped. But your PhD, your formation don't stop because you take now long time. In these situations, many people come from Africa. We have no scholarship, we have no job. For us who have a family in here, it was very difficult. That's the second bad experience of COVID. The another experience for PhD students is to lose balancing between family and professionals' life. Because of what they call it, now every office are blocked. We must stay in our home with our sons, and school it's blocked. You can do nothing. This disequilibrium between family and professionals' life affects our productivity to do PhD. Another negative experience, it's about many PhD students in the processes of their formations. They go anywhere to collect data and to do some research on the ground. But about COVID, I take some departments say, now it's impossible to come back in your university. They told you that you must stay in your country and do everything in your country. As some people do that in our country, we have many difficulties to have bibliothèque and space for to work and so-called electricity and so-called. That's the negative experience that I consider in the epidemic in our situations of doctor. The positive, the negative, it was the past years. The positive, it come in these years. In these years, we see there's many online resources, many online training in resource in distancial. That's a positive point of COVID-19 in our doctoral formations. I give for an example, many universities now consider distance training before it don't be credits in our formation doctoral. Now, with COVID, they can take it in considerations. That's one of positive experience. The last positive experience is for the life of doctoral students about their family. That's an individual situation. I see that to stay with my family give me another manner to see my family. That if COVID is not yes, I think that never I can see my family like I see now. Because in my life, it was disequilibrated. I take my doctoral formations first, my family. That's my conclusion positive about COVID in my situations. But when we must say the challenge now for people from African country, the challenge is that many things now are online. But African populations, students, doctors, don't benefit with this opportunity that COVID gives to all the students. The one reason is that we have no material to take all this advantage in our processes of doctoral. Because now we see that the organizations organize many training in the world, but if we cannot wait, students, people, Africans cannot go in the university because the lockdown migration is not, they stay in their country. But they can't benefit with these discussions because it's not easy to have material on place. That one challenge is to help them to have material they can benefit with all opportunity of this COVID. The last, just one example to people associations. In my case, I know that my participation in these sessions is free. That I know, that's positive for me. But the negative, now I'm a student. My membership is for 4 years. ESSPs don't take in account the situations of COVID in the situations of population of South Africa. I can't pay my membership like students because COVID, it was there. But ESSP say no, for students, it's 4 years. But there's many students, I think that they don't finish the PhD situations in 4 years. They take probably 5 or 6 years because of COVID. ESSP is a big association of populations that I think that they can take in account the situations of students, Africa PhD. Thank you.
Thank you, Fadi, for these reflections from your side, and also for pointing out already and pointing in the direction of what the association could do or could potentially change in order to facilitate. I saw also some questions already coming in on that point in the chat, so we will definitely pick up on that one in our debate in a second. Thank you for your reflections. I would like to pass on to the last speaker in the panel, Gustav Wachter. You're representing the European Association for Population Studies. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm actually the current president of IAPS. So I give the floor over to you, Gustav, to speak on our European students.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. Well, I think many points that were already raised are also the case in the European situation, the work-life balance, the collecting of data that might be delayed, all those kind of things. And well, what I also wanted to mention is that I'm not only a PhD student, but I'm also part of the steering committee of the IPS PhD network, which is actually a network of PhD students that we started shortly before the pandemic with the idea that we would have live meetings at conferences where we could have gatherings of PhD students to have specific sessions that are interesting to early career scholars. But then again, of course, we had the COVID pandemic and we had to turn everything online. And I was discussing also with this PhD network what we now see as the main challenges for early career scholars. And well, besides the things that you already all mentioned, we were really thinking a lot about the networking opportunities and how that now works in an online world, because it's not the same in the real life as it is online. And it has challenges and it has opportunities, but the challenge that we saw is that often the great ideas and also the sometimes small but very crucial advices are actually during more spontaneous or small interactions that it's really difficult to create online, because it's still quite possible to present your work, but it's in smaller groups, in smaller interactions, that's really difficult to have in an online situation. So that is something that we really see a role, well, both for senior scholars, but also for these associations to create online sessions that are more, well, that allow for these more smaller interactions, so that people can really talk with each other and really get in context, which is more difficult if you're on a screen with 40 or 50 people after your presentation. And especially if you just started, it's also sometimes a bit scary to just in front of so many people start asking questions or give comments. So that it will be really good to have smaller sessions such as masterclasses with a senior scholar that could then talk with PhD students on a specific topic, for example. It's also something that we started to do with the PhD network, and it actually worked quite well, but I think there's more opportunities for these kind of things to happen. And also something that we noticed in all our different institutes is that also the smaller interactions within the institutes are sometimes, well, more difficult, because if you're just starting and you want to submit your abstract to your first conference, that is something that you also sometimes learn just by talking during lunch or over coffee. And it's also those small things that are really important when you just start your career that are now, well, not happening anymore, because that's something that you forget if you're in a meeting and you just have your agenda and you're going through everything. But it's actually those small things that really can make a difference in, well, both how you feel about your work and your mental well-being, and but also to create this network that, well, you need for your future development of your career. So that was our main challenge that we saw, an important role also for the regional associations. And of course, we also see the opportunities that you can also have people joining such sessions that have lower travel budgets or that have difficult situations at home why they can't travel. So in that sense, it's really also, well, creating a more inclusive environment. So that's really also a positive thing that we should, I think, take away from this whole COVID situation. If we ever go back to a more normal situation, that we don't forget that there are inequalities and that we need to take that into account. And that's something that we can learn. For now, I'll leave it at that. I think the rest will come with all the questions, I suppose.
Thanks, Gustav, for your reflections also, and adding on that perspective more from the European side of the globe. Well, there are lots of things coming up, I think, in terms of what you're saying and the different elements of how the COVID pandemic affects your individual lives, how it affects your careers, how it affects also networking and collaborations, potentially both within projects, within institutions, but also beyond, also in terms of conferences like this that are held now online. I would like to start a first round of questions that relate a bit to what I think Gusta was ending her pitch with, the role of the associations and what role they have played in the past almost 2 years in the meantime, in your specific area, in your specific region. And then probably if you would like to say immediately something, but we can also do that in a second round, what actually should be done by the association. So what you think that associations could do or should have done, which has not been developed so far. So probably we can start with the first one, like what are elements that professional associations, regional population demography associations could do and have done so far. I would like to ask some of you to start the reflection, and obviously all of you can also add on to that. If people from the audience have any further questions, they can also raise their hand, and then we can bring them in to the discussion. And then we also move on to other questions that already came in via the chat, and probably more people already have questions via the chat as well. The first one I would like to hear a bit more about, probably Igor, if you would like to kick off, like what was the role of the regional or our professional associations? What do you think about these? Are they sufficient, and what could be further done?
So the Latin American Population Association has done different things. One of them was trying to incorporate early careers, academic professionals, by offering the reduced fees, as is one activity that is, used all over the world. So the price is $40 per year, and for early career, it's half. It's 50% discount. Besides that, we also have young professionals participating in networks side by side with people that are senior researchers, and this, give the opportunity to interact and maybe even collaborate and think together new projects. This interaction is really interesting, and what I see is the idea of trying to improve this kind of collaboration between academics from different levels in Latin America. And also we have here in Latin American Population Association efforts to strengthen the scientific communication. So we always have information about what is going on in terms of work opportunities all over the region. They collapse all this information and share among everyone. Information as data is something that is crucial. It is really important for us, knowing what's going on and where we can find places to continue our working. So they are working in these different fronts. And I think the work being done is great. I would just add, in terms of looking ahead, here in Latin America, we have a system that is completely different from the European one, for example. Here, the educational system is different in each country, and we do not have many collaborations that are fostered among the countries in the region. We have some, but what I see is more like individual partnerships between institutions. I think we could try to improve and to strengthen this kind of collaboration, of thinking in a program that goes beyond all the borders of the countries all over the region. So maybe this would be an important front to concentrate efforts, because of course we do not have graduate programs in demography in all the countries, so we can use the structure that we already have, giving more energy to this collaboration, and also increasing students' mobility and also professors' mobility. Everyone would gain from this kind of strategy. That's it.
Thanks a lot for those reflections. I think very useful. Probably we can add also the perspective, Stephanie, would you like to add on to that from your side, how you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start by discussing some of the things that have been done and then what could be done. For PAA, I have to say that I was really impressed by their ability to pivot to an online program for the 2021 meeting. So obviously the 2020 was canceled, and they tried their best to have some recorded sessions, but it was hard. It was really difficult. But for 2021, I think they did their best to have us have a conference that felt like a regular conference. They had, one thing that I really liked was that they had volunteers for posters, and so that everyone got feedback, which is, you know, when we have posters, if no one walks by your poster, then it's like, oh, I just came here for no reason because like I didn't get anything out of this. But for the virtual conference, they wanted at least 2 people to engage with every single poster. So I thought that was helpful, and that's something that could be carried on, like having a minimum of 1 or 2 people engage with posters so that everyone can get something out of the conference if you don't have an oral session. The other thing that I saw them create were spaces uniquely for early career scholars, like happy hours and things like that. They also had spaces for minority scholars and like first generation scholars. So I thought that was helpful and something that can be carried on. What I would love to see from PAA is more online training, like Philly was saying, like leveraging our move to online and getting more knowledge out, more information out. And so webinars on navigating the job conference, the job market, for example. So like, you know, all our schools do stuff like that, but some of our schools don't have access to put on whole day sessions. And so if associations could take, you know, some of the resources to put on a half a day conference, for example, on how to navigate the academic market or how to navigate the industry market. I think that would be great, and take leadership in that. That would be awesome. And online training, like I said, so, you know, applying to PhD programs in demography or applying to postdocs and things like that. I think that would be great as well.
Thanks for these add-ons to what was mentioned. Indeed, I think that's very useful to hear. One of the questions in the chat also pointed to the role of the regional associations and the elements that were included in your presentation, Flora, about not adding on more pressure on early career scholars. So I thought it's probably nice from you to hear how you see that and what your view is on the role of regional association, but also probably the role of early career scholars themselves in that, to avoid that they probably get overburdened, yet at the same time do get what they need. Can I ask you to reflect on that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, to be honest, I actually have not yet, actively engaged with the APA activities, so I could not say more about that. But what I meant about having a safe place, having communities that can provide safe place for us to grow both personally and professionally, and not adding more pressure, is in terms of, you know, the competitive atmosphere that usually exists in any communities, in any academic communities. So yeah, I think this pandemic for me highlights the importance of, you know, being kind to each other as well as in academic community. So this afternoon I attended a session where the chair of the session was very you know, kind and gentle, and like he gave very constructive comments and inputs for the, I believe, like the students or that maybe just started to present. Maybe this might be their early conferences that they attended. So I think having that, you know, figures like that really helpful in shape us as researchers that can grow personally and also professionally. So I think having that, I know, nurturing that kind of society, community, is very important, including in academic communities.
Thank you. I think that really calls for trying to be friendly to each other is even more important in COVID times than it was before. But I do think in demography, we're probably doing a relatively good job, and we can compare at a later point probably. But thanks for these reflections. I'm trying to take the questions now in the order that they came in the chat or when the hands were raised. And Susanna, you were the first one also to ask a question. I saw you also raised your hand. Would you like to ask your question yourself, or shall I summarize it if you would like? you want me to summarize it, or you would like to pose the
I
question
would
yourself?
like to add, because I have the question on the chat, but I would like to comment on the association's role, taking from a lab side, and also because I'm working with a lot of associations. So I would like to say that from my experience, ALAP has included young people since the beginning. And this was one thing that we had followed since the beginning. The presidents, the director, the council of the association is mostly formed with young mid-career and young people. So we are trying. So I think Igor's answer on that reflects how ALAP has been doing. But I would like to aggregate that I feel we need more interaction with the national associations here, because ALAP cannot take for all countries, and the national associations would have a very important role, including the young students or career in the field. So I would urge that we as ALAP can try to make our other associations also to see how we can make a joint effort with the national association. So, and also saying that ALAP was the first one after the pandemic saying that we are going for this online conference. And if we didn't have the help of the young people with the digital skills, we wouldn't have done a marvelous virtual meeting in December of 2020. So that was great to this participation. So my question here is that we are talking about a lot of academic careers and demography, and I'm always pushing for we should enter other fields, and we know business, demography, and the private sector has a lot of things to do. So how COVID had changed that or not? And also in the public spheres, we know that working with policymakers for demographers would be very important. So do you have an idea if the pandemic made that worse? My guess is we have better opportunities now. People are looking for these people to work in the private sectors, making demography more important when COVID mortality is on the table. So what do you think? I would like to hear about it.
Thanks, Susanna, for your words and also explaining how in ALAP things were tried to manage. Also your call for the national organizations and the role there for early career scholars. But let's turn to your question. I don't know, Feli, would you like to say something about this in the African case? Because you also talked in your presentation about job opportunities. I think Susanna's question relates to it in the sense that, well, if there's no or limited job opportunities in the academic side, how does it relate to worse or better potentially opportunities in other fields to find jobs in the context of this pandemic? May I ask you to reflect on that?
If I understand the questions, that if it's good or bad opportunity about academic.
Yeah, are there new opportunities beyond academia to find jobs and get into the job market, since potentially in the academic spheres, the job positions are more limited?
Yes, the academic job is very, very limited in Africa, and very, very limited for sometimes the thematics for what they give scholarship, for example, just one. Sometimes that's the thematic that don't use in populations Africa. Say example for COVID. We talk about COVID. If you see the literatures, many literatures, Africa is not very, very they don't analyze situations of Africa. It's true that COVID sometimes is a very, very high in the structure of population structures. Africa holds a young populations, but we have in transitions of our populations. The life experience is augmented, come very, very high. That we must reflect now what be the consequence of COVID, not only now, but in 5 years or 10 years, for example. I think that it was interesting in the case of Africa to do some baseline study to know what populations Africa think about COVID, what they know about COVID.
Okay.
There's no student who can give what people think. We know that just down in Congo, for example, when you read the journal that you see, they say, there's no people, they send us a lot of vaccines, but no one people take vaccines, for example, in the case of my country. But
Okay.
there's no student demography who's very interesting in discussions. I think that it was a thematic that we can integrate in population situations Africa in the future or now.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that really relates also to what Igor was pointing out for new fields of research potentially that we can go into. I would like, if you don't mind, to move on to also hear Stephanie, because you were talking about the job market in particular as well. And I think the question that Susanna posed related to that very clearly. How do you see the opportunities in the North American context in that sense?
Yeah, I think here in the US, specifically as a postdoc, I think I have seen a mass exodus from academia to private and public sector jobs. There is a huge need for demographers, for people with quantitative skill sets to analyze the large data sets. And so at least from my experience, I have seen PhDs going to non-academic fields. I think it was Flora that mentioned the wages are more competitive in non-academic fields. There's no academic jobs. And so, yeah, I think and PhD training programs are starting to grapple with that and prepare their students for non-academic fields.
Thank you. There are lots of questions coming in. So, Susanna, I move on to another question, even though we could talk much more about this even. There was one other question about what your view is on when we are beyond COVID-19. Would you continue to have virtual meetings in person or hybrid meetings? And probably I can ask Igor, what do you think from the more early career perspective? What should be done?
Actually, we have to see or look at the positive points of each strategy. So one of the positive is that we are here at IUSSP Congress, and we did not have to pay anything to participate in this session related to travel or hotels. And we know that this is the bunch of what we have to pay when we go to a conference. So I think in terms of giving opportunity to more people to participate, the online strategy is great. But on the flip side, we also lose, even trying to adapt, we lose a lot of networking. Being able to just catch someone that you always wanted to talk to, you know, in the coffee break. And, you know, I'm from Brazil, I work with this subject. I know that you are the reference in my field. I'd like to talk to you about an idea. You know, this is much more spontaneous than during the virtual platform. So if I had to choose, I would open both possibilities. So you can go in person, and also those who are not able to attend the conference, they can participate online. I know that this is not trivial, because in terms of effort to organize an online congress, it's crazy. And in person, it's already really complicated. Doing both, you just duplicate how hard it is. But if possible, I would go with both.
Thank you. I would like to also hear the reflection on this issue by Gusta, because you're also currently involved in organizing the next conference for the European Association.
Yes, well, I can tell you it is a lot of work and a lot of thinking, especially. I mean, I fully agree that the good thing of this COVID pandemic is that people can join online, and I think that is something that we should keep to make it more inclusive. But then again, you also want to have some sort of possibility to meet face to face, because that is just, you can't replace those kind of small interactions online. But yeah, it is really a challenge on how do you then mix both worlds? How do you make sure that people online don't feel left out of so how do you really integrate both audiences, so to say? And of course, with COVID, everything is unpredictable. So at one moment you're like, oh, we can do everything live, and then you're like, oh no, everything is going to be back online again. So it's really a lot of effort. But I think that is also maybe somewhere where associations can learn from each other. If one of the associations already has experience, that we could get in touch with each other and sort of exchange best practices also, because, well, it is a lot of work, but if you already know someone has some experiences, then at least you don't have to invent the wheel all over again. And I was also thinking, if conferences are online and we want to involve early career scholars more, I think a way of doing that is also to give them a role in the program, in the sense to give them, for example, the opportunity to chair a session. Because if you're just attending, it's more difficult to get in touch. But if you're, for example, a chair in a session, you would already have to email with people, and at least some way you get in contact with people, and then afterwards it's also easier to reach out. So if it's online, that might also be a way to involve early career scholars more in the feeling part of the society. But I think hybrid is going to be the way forward. So if anybody has advice or tips, we're happy to hear them.
Thank you so much on these reflections regarding the format of our future communications and exchanges. Octavio, you have been waiting patiently with your hand raised, and now the floor is yours to ask your question, because I don't think I saw it in the chat, so you can just pose your question yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me? Do you?
Yes.
Great. No, I think it's kind of a hard thing to write, so I prefer to say it. Like, I would like to add some different perspective, which is the migrant's perspective while doing a PhD or being an early career researcher. Like, I concur with that all the presenters made great points and they're very valid, but in my particular situation, I feel like I get most in line with Stephanie's feelings, which is like, I moved to Europe late in 2019 to do a PhD, and the academic life has many perks. And I think that since the pandemic started, most of them were removed, but you still have to do the same sacrifices. So it's like, yeah, you plan for years to do a PhD, to make him being paid to get in conference, meet new people, make new friends, do a dissertation, and suddenly you have like Zoom parties and a strange office job where you don't get to see your family or your friends because you are abroad. And I get that I'm saying this from Latin America, where opportunities to do that are very rare. So you have to move away and improve. And I'm sure that that happens for many countries. I don't know, virtual conferences are great. Webinars are great. And I hope they are here to stay. But at some point, I think they might affect migration or mobility, because I don't know, like I already moved. I already I did my part of the deal, which is to move away to get those perks, and suddenly those perks are not there anymore. And I think that also that can affect the quality of your dissertation and your work. Because, you know, instead of feeling inspired and empowered, you just sometimes want to get the job done. I don't know. That's my particular perspective. I know that I'm in a very particular place, but I know that there are many people in this situation. I don't know. It is what it is, but thank you.
Well, thanks. I think it links actually to several elements we've talked about, and also the fact that you cannot replace in-person meetings and connections, and that also, especially when you are migrating to another place or moving to another place to pursue your career. I don't know, we've heard some people already saying something on these elements. I don't know, is there anybody in the panel, Flora or Stephanie, any of you who would like to say something more on this? Because in the European case, I can definitely say I've heard many of these stories. I don't know how it is for your regions.
Yeah, I can say from personal experience, I started the postdoc and I did not meet with my mentors in person for the whole first year. And so if you think about a postdoc, right, like you're supposed to be growing, I had no connection with my mentors. I mean, I met with them virtually, so I did have mentors, but I didn't have a one-on-one until a year and 2 months after moving to North Carolina. And so that has huge implications for my professional development. I haven't given an in-person presentation in over 2 years. So what does that mean for my job market opportunities? I haven't connected with other postdocs or students. I haven't gotten to know the area where I live. And so I think it's definitely like non-academic things and academic things that like a whole cohort of us are going to deal with for the rest of our academic careers. Like people like myself, Octavio, like we're just like weird, like, I don't know. It's also very lonely. I talk about that all the time. Like, you know, not meeting my mentors in person for a whole year, not meeting all of the postdocs, working in a cubicle by myself has really taken away from kind of the joy of academia, right? And that collaborative environment that a lot of us look for.
Thank you so much. And your reflections are, I think, very valid in the academic career. I think it also holds for other positions throughout your career, but it hurts in particular your stages in the career, I think, as you're rightly pointing. I don't know, Flora, whether you would like to add anything on this point?
Not from now. Okay.
Okay.
Second, all they say.
Okay. So probably we can go to Jordan Klein. You've also been waiting there with your hand raised. I don't see you, but yeah, now I do see you. So I think your question was not in the chat, but you raised your hand. So please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I wanted to ask, about just general career advice you would have in this certain environment, but it seems like a lot of that's been answered. So one thing that I would like to get your perspectives on is, so, you know, we've been talking a lot about the themes, right? How this kind of world in which we're doing everything remotely is both very limiting, but also opens up opportunities and that we might not have had before. And so one of those things is so things like work-life balance. For example, right, you can, you know, do certain parts of your work you're doing your work online, so you don't necessarily need to be on a certain campus in person, or that's right, like you can, we figured out we can do remote teaching, we figured out how we do remote research, all these different things. So kind of, and I don't necessarily like this term, but, you know, thinking like post-pandemic, or rather like kind of going forward into the future, what do you think are things about the way that we've been able to figure out how to do our work remotely that universities should carry forward in terms of improving work-life balance, not just conferences, but yeah, in terms of, you know, flexibility with hybrid formats and things of that nature?
Thank you for that question. And I see some links with the comment that also Stephanie Chamberlain made in the chat, where she also refers to senior scholars and how they could help early career scholars who have children. I think your question, Jordan, is in line in the sense that you really think about work-life balance in general, not just in terms of parenthood, but really how we should think about that in the future. Who in the panel would like to react to that? Is there anybody who would like to say something on it and what your view on that is for the future and what your needs are potentially?
May I just add one comment?
Igor, go ahead.
So what we have seen is that for some professionals during the online classes given the COVID-19, people just speed up their scientific production. So one thing that comes to mind is that maybe the excess of in-person experiences also is not good for the scientific production. So I would think about the idea of not needing to do everything in person again. So we have learned a lot about how to use the internet to get in touch with people and to meet with our colleagues, and this is great. I think we do not have to spend too much time in personal meetings like of 2, 3, 4 hours discussing. Sometimes, you know, you just lose the track of the conversation. We lose time. So maybe one of the good things was that, well, we do not need to do everything in person. We can go straight to the point in a personal or an online conversation, and avoiding taking too much time and what do not add a lot to our increasing in terms of scientific production. So I think we can learn a lot from this virtual time and making something hybrid. But this in terms of interactions with our colleagues at the university. But in terms of classes, I still think that the in-person is the best format. You feel much more connected with the students when you have everyone in the same room. So in this case, I would not change, or even the hybrid. I really prefer in person. I think it's better for the professor and also for the students to enjoy more the opportunity of learning, focusing on only one thing. Because when you are at home, you have your cell phone, you have your TV, you have your fridge, you have everything competing for your attention. In this case, classes in person.
May I add something to that?
Yes, I was just about to add. Is there somebody else who would like to add on to this? We're heading towards the end of the session, but there's definitely room to add on. Gusta, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I really agree with Igor that these online meetings with colleagues are more efficient, but I think there's also a little risk in doing all the meetings efficiently online, because I think that also, well, you don't leave room for more brainstorming creative ideas. So I think you should really also think what kind of meeting it is and whether it can be done online or whether it needs a bit more room sort of for new ideas to expand. And especially I see a lot of colleagues like early career scholars that miss that element, that there's sort of an environment where inspiration and new ideas can arise. So I think with the online meetings we should sort of balance that between, okay, we need efficient meetings and sort of bullet points that we can go through, and more meetings that need more. That was the main thing I wanted to add. But I also think that organizations and universities now also saw that still a lot of work is being done also at home, so that there might be a bit more flexible, considering specific personal situations at home, and being a bit more flexible with providing also the opportunity to do some things from home. That is, I think, something we can also learn from this COVID situation, definitely.
Thank you very much. We have 5 minutes left only before the end of this session. And I would like to give one more opportunity for asking a question. I'm just going to ask you to be relatively brief in posing your questions so that we can also have some time for answering. Arun, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Helga. I'm just in line with everybody speaking here, and just to expand Gusta's point, when I look back, I really missed. So I moved to US this year for my postdoc. So I really missed meeting my guide, my supervisors. There's a lot of things that I could learn that I'm missing. But when I look back, this is the only year and in my entire PhD career, and now also, that I had attended both IUSSP, PAA, Population Association America, the Asian Population Association, and the Gerontological Society America. So this is the only year that I had the pleasure of attending all these conferences. Though, as Gustav rightly said, probably the combined effect of all of them together is the one that I could have attended in a larger conference, in person. Just putting my, thank you.
Thank you once again, Arun, also for bringing this up and then reinforcing several points that were brought up before, and then also sharing your personal experience with us here in that sense. With those words, I would like to wrap up this conversation, which originally it seemed like 90 minutes is so long, and now we find out it's way too short to really discuss everything. At the same time, I think what was also shown that the experiences from around the globe are not that different, so that we definitely should and could reach out to each other to learn, because if I hear all your reflections throughout this session, you see many difficulties, you're experiencing many difficulties, you're also experiencing opportunities, and the way you can capitalize on the opportunities, but also how to deal with the difficulties are things that I think can be exchanged. And these kind of sessions are extremely useful for finding each other, knowing this from each other, and hopefully also reaching out to each other. So I'm very grateful for everybody in the panel, each of you representing one of the regions in the world in this IOSSP conference. And I also hope that this can be a starting point and a continued exchange moment between all of you, potentially individually, but particularly also between the associations. And as was mentioned many times, we probably have many more opportunities to meet in this kind of virtual context also in the future. And let's hope we can really capitalize on those and help each of you future careers further in that way. I'm very much grateful to each of you. I'm grateful also for the IOSSP for making this possible and taking this opportunity. And I hope to meet many of you either online or in person at any event. And I wish you all the best in your careers individually and also within your regional associations. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you.